So the primary factor or factors for me in seeing a shift back from public cloud into private cloud or into on-premise is not entirely, but rather largely based on cost. It's on spends in cloud. And I think if we look at that issue, we had to take that all the way back to a kind of a pre-public cloud era, and how did things start getting put into cloud. I've talked a lot about digital transformation and what digital transformation used to be. It used to mean there was sort of, it's still a sort of a buzzword type territory that has some sort of clear definition. But if we go back to sort of 2016 to 2017, 2018, digital transformation was the must-do thing for the CV, particularly of the CIO. And more often than not, and I appreciate this is nuanced, it was just a copy and paste of everything out of a physical data center into a public cloud. So it was just taking everything that was in existence, no real thought about it. There was no transformation. I think the sort of concept of moving it to this wonderful new sort of ethereal world was good enough, and it just kind of got dumped there. Really, it was just a massive shift of data. And that didn't actually lend itself to be more cost effective. It didn't lend itself to be more technically effective. It was sort of sold with a dream that non-technical people didn't understand, but they saw that the world of cloud was coming. To be fair, I think what has happened over the last sort of 3, 4, 5 years is those who were more early adopters, even who moved like that, who transformed like that, have started to transform properly, but whilst in cloud. So I think a lot of that technical debt has been addressed, but you have what was kind of dumped in there to start with, which was probably far from economical. And what they have found is that they're now looking at, what do we need, what do we want to use, how do we want to use it? And the cost of this doesn't necessarily stack up against the world that they've come from. Now that's from a technical perspective. I think there's also, from a business perspective, you're looking at your CFO wants to ultimately be able to forecast what's going to be spent, how's it going to be spent, where's it going to be spent, what controls have I got around this, and a lot of people sort of hang their hat on the wonderful world of agile, and not agile by what it actually is, but by the kind of the dictionary word agile. And agile perceptively means I can kind of do things quickly, but really it means I can do what I want without any control, and that's what's happened. So financial controllers, all the way up to your CFO, have not been able to really forecast what spends are. It's just a ticking meter of cost, which has become difficult not just to control, but also say to prepare for, to budget for, and now there's a few years of evidence of what that cost looks like, or at least its lack of control. That's become another problem. Whilst it is less or was less agile, the world of sort of on-premise was clunky. It was, things took months to do. There was at least stringent process and stringent control, so there was an understanding of how much things would cost. And I think it's now about finding that balance. So rather than the sort of shift to and the complete shift away, it's now a realistic look at how can we get the things that aren't best suited for cloud and can be far more cost effective out of cloud, and make the best of all of these worlds, because everything has a place. No one place is right. And then of course there's the question of networking. How do we connect these together? Because the problem then is it's everything is built essentially on shifting sands. It's not just, hey, if we move it out today, can these two things stick together? Well, it's not just two things. Every technology that comes to the forefront may have a different home. So, one of the things that we see pretty much everywhere we look now is AI. AI is talked about extensively. I've been recently looking in some depth at GPU as a service. So how can I have that these, this bulk and this power available to me in a cloud-like way? Well, that's not necessarily going to be delivered in your public cloud provider of choice. Whilst they do have services, your Amazons of the world, your Microsofts of the world, NVIDIA have their own cloud offering, which will come as no surprise. Google, of course, are always there. Oracle, players you will and will not have heard of. So it's about having the means to not just connect what you know you need today, but be flexible enough to immediately connect or disconnect the things that you may need tomorrow. And of course, always at the heart of that, the most important thing is ensuring that it is secure. Everything that's moving from A to B to B to C, wherever it may be, you can meet whatever concerns that the vertical, the sector that you work in places upon you, or the ones that you naturally have in running a business. Yeah, so regulation and compliance is always an interesting one, because whilst it differs from sort of business sector to sector and vertical to vertical, there's a lot of commonality in what the requirement ultimately is. I think one of the things that's the biggest problem in this cloud world that we have, be it public, private, hybrid, on-premise, wherever all these things are, is the visibility of what is going on, where it's going on, how it's going on, but also the consistency of the enforcement. So depending on the size of the company, this may be a bigger problem, and also bigger companies tend to have heavier regulation as well. It's if you have presence in a Microsoft and Amazon and a Google and Oracle, these are always our interesting public cloud examples, that you can try and enforce the same policies, the same security approach, but unless you're using the same security devices within what is a set of native tools in different worlds, it's entirely possible and it's probable that there will be subtle intricacies, subtle differences, and that's not to say, one of the biggest issues, particularly with security, of course, is always down to human error. Often, if you're big enough that you have multiple clouds like that, you've probably got teams that are specifically working in those clouds. So it's then their adaptation of what they think the controls are, based on these inconsistent security approaches. Very secure approaches. These are, industry-leading vendors and technologies, but they're going to be different. I think that is one of the biggest challenges that needs to be overcome, is how can I promote consistency? And I've had conversations with many CISOs as well as technicians and engineers, and everyone means well, and everyone talks about automation and scripts and, we've got that all covered. But again, everything needs to adapt and change, and making sure those adaptations, those changes happen everywhere. So that can be a problem. I know that centralized architecture went very it was very not on vogue several years ago, and distributed architecture was very much what everyone was talking about. And I think that's sort of still the same, and it still has application in many areas. But from a security perspective, I'm always quite a big fan of considering where there might be a more centralized approach. That doesn't mean just one great big firewall or something in the middle of everything, but it means that you've got consistency of policy, and you should have that much safer feeling as that you're doing, at least if you're doing, look, do you know what, even if you're doing the wrong things, at least you can then see them and you can make those changes, or you recognize where the thing that is incorrect is, because not everything always goes right. But that then also lends itself to the visibility question, which is, I want to be able to see what is going on, not just the good, not just be happy that everything we're doing is right, but the wrong can be dealt with, that we can see this. Again, whilst it is possible to take feeds from all sorts of places and aggregate them, there's many pieces of software and approaches that can do that. I get that. But again, the ease of the approach to be able to look into that one area and work on that one area to get that visibility, to have that single pane of glass, to have that kind of single source of truth, I personally think is really important. It isn't the only way, like I say, the sort of centralized architecture approach, not the only way to do things, but that's the sort of way that I think is starting to become a bit more popular again, in light of, say, all those technologies on the periphery of this as well. But that's certainly what we're seeing when we talk to the more heavily regulated businesses. And health is a great example of that as well. You know, sometimes when you've got something as sprawling as health, you know, National Health Service is absolutely massive, let alone all of the private healthcare companies that are on the side of that. Being able to not just offer that, but have that you know, that warm feeling that you're doing the right thing and protecting the data in the way that you should, or be it patient data or user access or whatever it might be, is certainly one of the more common approaches that we're now starting to see. Key technical considerations when you're looking to manage a hybrid solution is going to be around looking at what the biggest problems are and ensuring that they are constantly got rid of. So if we're looking at this from a network perspective, which is what we should be, then historically it's the pace of change that's one of the biggest problems. The ability to adapt quickly, and make sure that that is cost effective and secure as you do it. So if you're going to have multiple public clouds, maybe multiple private clouds, some on-premise, and that, you know, we've taken quite a big, bold example there. I appreciate there's probably few companies that would have all of those things out like that, but they'd have a sort of a smaller version of that, maybe one or two public, private data center. Being able to have a platform that allows you to adapt to change immediately, for me, is one of the most important things. It's something that says, you know, I can connect to what I need when I need it. I can scale what I need when I need it. I have the ability to do that securely, and I have the ability to do that cost effectively. So a good example of something like this would be like a data migration. And data migration can come in many forms. It can be because there's a big shift of data from a database or databases. It could be that you want to move where your storage is. So again, we're moving that from A to B. It might be that we're moving from legacy applications to new applications that have been built. And these all require a form of data movement and data migration. But on the flip side of this, which I always think is a sort of a more exciting way of looking at this, is user consumption. So as a user, I have a service that I want to be consuming. It could be the most basic thing, from your email to your internet to an application you use in, you know, you open Chrome and use that. I can't afford for there to be downtime. I don't want to have an experience where I suddenly get a page that's not displayed. And it might be because that's just frustrating in my day-to-day life. It might also be that I've got a critical care application in health, or it's something to do with policing, or it's something to do with being able to give a quote in insurance. I need for that to be seamless. And in order for that to be seamless, those changes need to happen underpinned by a network, a foundation that allows that change to happen such that the user sees no difference. It is absolutely a seamless experience. And so, you know, that key consideration for me is, how do I build that? Where do I build it? What is it going to be? I almost want to, you know, forget about it. Networks are one of those wonderful things that, you know, everybody knows that no one thinks about it when it's working, but everybody hates it when it doesn't. It's, you know, the classic, like if we go out driving, you know, no one cares about the roads until the roads are blocked or there's a diversion, and then everybody hates the roads, and it's exactly the same thing. And that's fine, because that's actually what success looks like. What success looks like is, I don't want you to even remember that it exists in many ways, because it is doing those things seamlessly for you underneath, such that you have that foundation for change wherever it may be. And I think as we've moved into this sort of, you know, let's call it a digital era, and again, this is over the last decade, this is not in the last 12, 24 months, there is no concept of a start and an end anymore. The pace of change, the sort of exponential growth of the use of technology means that everything is always moving. There's always, there's not this legacy concept of, here's where everything is, here's how I consume it, I'll sweat that asset for 5 to 10 years, and then what I'll do is I'll just move it somewhere else and sweat it again. That was just a pure cost type thing at best. That isn't how it works anymore, at the smallest level, at the largest level, and it's simply never ever going to work like that again. So because things are moving so fast, it's about thinking like that as well. I don't just need it because I might need something in 6 months' time, or this might change in a year. It's not how it's going to work. I need to be able to shift these workloads, make these decisions on what I'm connecting to for different reasons, and it all needs to happen seamlessly. You know, networks can have a cloud-like experience as well. That consumer expectation that I can have what I want when I want, I can change it as I need. That is what that network needs to provide. And therefore, I think that's the consideration that needs to go into, you know, if you're someone who supplies this type of service or you build this type of service, that is what you should be building to. It's not just a function of must meet A. It's B, C, D, E all the way to Z constantly and then wrap round again. That is what it does. You know, if you're a seller of those services, then you must assume that that is exactly what your consumer wants as well. So that is how things need to be built. That is the biggest consideration. And that's before we layer on security. And this is, you know, security comes in many fashions. Network, I see security as very much a sort of an in-depth play. There's not one thing that just secures stuff. I mean, of course, everyone will claim that they have something that does that, but the best way to be secure is to have, you know, multiple locks on the door with different types of keys. So there should be something at a network level. And of course, there'll always be things at application levels, as there should be as well. But you know, being able to understand and audit, I always think about this like a digital footprint, like a forensic. I should always know, even if I can't see the data, I should know what went where and when, because that forms part of a much bigger picture, which could be something that we need to understand in flight, but it can also be something that we need to look back at, you know, like I say, almost sort of forensically. Those heuristics are important to everything as well. So all of those considerations to not just the future of networking, it's what we should expect now, but sadly, I think contrary to what many people may believe, this we're a far cry from this. I don't think this exists inside many companies and is not necessarily supported by some of the larger players who should probably do that. Considering the fact that we're seeing, you know, a move back to on-premise or private cloud, or at least some shift back towards that, and thinking about the future, maybe trying to make some kind of bold predictions, which are always very difficult nowadays. Things change so fast. I think one of the things that I've learned, and technology demonstrates this to me, and it's happening faster, so I think it's easier to see. Most things are kind of like a pendulum. And if you think of on-premise as this, you know, to the left on the pendulum, and then cloud, public cloud on the right, everything tends to settle back towards the middle when things are understood, they're tried, they're tested, or of course, if the next new thing comes along, one of the other things they do is just disappear altogether. I think with this cloud space, again, whatever cloud means to people, it isn't going anywhere. I mean, if we strip back the kind of the marketing noise of what cloud means, really what you've still got underneath everything are great big data centers with blocks of compute in it. And so at its fundamental level, it's kind of the same. It's then just something that sits on top that allows you to use it. So I think it is going to become very commoditized, very heavily commoditized, a proper race to the bottom of there are many ways that you can do this. It's this block of compute here, this block of compute here, this block of compute here, whether it's called private cloud, on-premise or public cloud. You know, in on-premise world, we've been using servers and mainframes and all sorts of things with virtualized partitions for years, tens of years. It's just the same in many ways as what cloud really is kind of delivering. You've just got this new generation of people that have never seen this, and so this is all they know. So I think it really is just going to come back to the middle. I think it's not going to matter. I think cost is going to become king a lot more, and I think that will drive a race to the bottom. There'll be some real considerations around that. One of the things that I do think, however, will always be present, because it kind of always is the sort of what we call brand loyalty. I'm just trying not to use the term fanboyism. Some people love Amazon, some people love Microsoft, some people love Google, and they're not prepared to listen to anyone else. In the same way that some people will buy a Windows-driven laptop, some people will buy an Apple Mac. So I think there'll always be market share and shift for those kind of things. But I think the days of a monopoly, because it certainly looked at one point like public cloud was just going to wipe everything out. And let's be clear, we still have tons of conversations that would make you believe that. We still hear regularly terms like cloud first, which to me, I don't think that's quite what the sentiment was for it, but doesn't work for me. To me, it's right tool, right job. And it's not cloud first, it's put it in whatever meets the requirement best. There's going to be a lot of public cloud for a long time, but I do think it's going to balance out. I think the on-premise data center providers are going to sort of come back to the front a little bit over the coming sort of months and years. And I do think that AI is going to have a huge part to play in this as well. Because ultimately, like I said, it's that compute power, which is raw physical compute power, which people and companies will want access to, that I just don't think lends itself perfectly to being done in the public cloud model. I think it actually lends itself far better to private cloud, or depending on how you want to shape your own sort of CapEx, OpEx approach, actually buying your own stuff and just doing it on premise. So that could really influence what we see over the next few years. But I guess the takeaway here is that cloud in any form, particularly public cloud, isn't going anywhere at all.